We've got starvation in Gaza and elsewhere. We've got violence and outside agitators erupting on campuses. Our institutions are crumbling. Our trust in the solidness and the stability of our lives and the lives around us, particularly people with less means and marginalized identities, is shaken. We are like that polar bear hovering on the iceberg. Or not. At the same time, we are experiencing great leaps in our understanding of the universe as a series of self-sustaining systems that work in collaboration with each other. There's a liver pathologist, a professor at NYU, who has released a book called Notes on Complexity. And he lays out the science of how complex systems behave that explains the interconnectedness of all things. And that Deepak Chopra says will change the way that you understand yourself in the universe. So how do we hold those two? Breakthroughs in science that are saying that everything is a self-sustaining system that is always in relation with each other so that life can find a way. And the fact that our world looks like it is crumbling. Thiel says that these two realities, they exist at the same time, and sometimes you can't see them both. For instance, if you think about that picture, right, of the vase and the two faces, which I will show you later, but the vase and the two faces, they define each other, and yet your mind cannot see them both at the same time. You can switch really fast between the two, but you can't see them exactly at the same time. And that's how he kind of got into this idea of complexity. He's a Zen student, and he was looking at a piece of incense that was burning, and he wanted to know, was the incense the flame? Was it the ash? Was it the unburned stick? And that's what kind of opened it up to him that in one sense, it was all of it at the same time. And plurality is actually more than both and. It's actually understanding that even though these things are different, they are all true. So plurality is recognizing that people of different classes, religion, and races are together in society, but continue to have their different traditions and interests. And it calls on us, in one sense, to start paying attention to what we are listening to. Are we listening to the turmoil of the world in one sense and holding that as our one true reality? Are we listening to the science of it and understanding how we can be helpful in bringing to life more positive things? And plurality, I believe, is a way for us consciously, purposely, to wend our way through those realities. I was really fortunate when I was in seminary to go to Turkey. I went to Turkey on a pilgrimage to find the intersections between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And one of the places that we looked at in terms of preparation for this intersection of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity was a place called Andalusia. And you may not have heard of it, but Sheila undoubtedly has. It was from 711 to 1492. It was the Iberian Peninsula pre-Spain. And it was under Islamic rule, but Islamic rule with this idea of pluralism, right? And out of that time, where you had Muslims, Christians, and Jews all living together, it was an amazingly innovative society, which Sheila will tell you about next week, right? But I will give you the cliff notes. It was characterized by this very diverse population, and it contributed to rich cultural, intellectual, and artistic exchange during the Middle Ages. It fostered an intellectual exchange and cooperation among people of different cultures and backgrounds, and the diversity allowed scholars from different traditions to collaborate and build on each other's work. And in that time, there were advances in trigonometry, astronomy, surgical techniques, pharmacology, mathematics, and agriculture, and numerous other things. There were lots of inventions that came out. Water clocks with gears, mechanical toys, aqueducts, and bridges. They figured out how to move water from one place to another using very interesting systems. In fact, there is a very lovely sculpture garden called Green, it's outside of Merrill's Cove. It's called, hold on, I know. Brook Green Gardens. And Brook Green Gardens is one of the biggest American sculpture gardens. But they have all of these reflecting pools with these sculptures, that are spewing water. And they are moving that water from one pond to another pond using the technology that emerged out of Andalusia. And in fact, all around this sculpture garden, there are all sorts of plaques that are wisdom from all over. So it's really this amazing place. If you ever have a chance to be in North Carolina, I would definitely, you should go to Brook Green Gardens. So Andalusia flourished from 711 to 1492 when Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand expelled the Jews and the Muslims. And with this highly creative people expelled, that birthed the Renaissance. So, and we're familiar with 1492, right? Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But we're not familiar with how it is that he went exploring, because our history is about conquest and power. It is not about plurality and different groups of people all contributing to a very innovative society. The one thing that I think about, because oftentimes we are in this situation where we're looking for something that's pure. If there was this big population that existed in one place for 800 years, and then expelled groups of people, I would say there's nothing pure. Like, we could all go into Ancestry, like whatever that is, and find all of us like kind of being all mixed up. So this idea that purity, and a way to really limit plurality, with the idea of purity in my book, doesn't really factor in at all. So plurality. So what does plurality do for us on a personal level? I think one of the things that it does for us is it makes it so that we do not have to decide who's right and who's wrong. We can actually hold that Unitarian Universalist, tenet that, there's many ways to truth and there's many realities and they all exist at the same time. And sometimes we can't see them. The other thing that I think that it helps is that it offers us, a way to say, oh, all of these things are going on. So that we don't have to, like, in one sense, we don't have to be so frightened of a new idea. We can actually, like, kind of save our emotional well-being by considering lots of different perspectives. Also, when I was at seminary, I took an intercession course on studying interreligious studying of ancient texts. And there's a theologian, Peter Pan. He comes from the Catholic tradition, and he was a speaker at this in this intercession course. And he said that you actually had to read people's sacred texts with the idea that you were willing to be converted by them. Right? You're not like, oh, this is odd to me. No. You're going to open yourself up that you would actually allow yourself to be converted. He got into a lot of trouble with this idea. I mean, the Catholic hierarchy did not, like, necessarily really appreciate this. But oh, by the way, he was very relentless with it, and still is a very huge and well-respected theologian in the Catholic tradition. So we have to actively be open-minded. Pluralism asks us to be actively open-minded. It asks us to try new things. It asks us to actually try something. Like, for instance, I was just like, what popped into my mind is I used to always, Zachary, when he was younger, was a little time, my son, Zach, was a little tiny bit of a picky eater. He tried everything in the beginning and then went into a stage where it was like peanut butter quesadilla and Annie's, macaroni and cheese.
And hot dogs at school.
I don't know. He went to the homestead school. They didn't have hot dogs. But at any rate, but I used to always tell Zachary that he always had to try whatever I was making. He always had to try it. And I would often tell him, there's nothing in it that you won't like. They're trying to set the stage of that kind of open mind, right? And so that's really what pluralism actually teaches us, that we need to have, in one sense, an open mind and purposely look for the different perspectives that exist in that moment. Now, stepping back into this complexity theory, which I am taken by. My mom is a member of IONS, which is the Institute for Noetic Sciences, and she came across this video by this guy. His name is Dr. Neil Theise, Theise, and he is talking about how everything in our universe, our bodies, birds, it's all self-sustaining systems. And his big example is ants. Sometimes you can see, like, there's something on the floor. It looks like a line, right? But and your mind first looks at it and says, oh, that's solid. Or when you see, like, a huge swarm of birds and you don't know what it is, it says, oh, this looks solid, but it is not solid. It is individual birds that are all flying, in one sense, in concert with each other. It's ants who are, like, moving in a food line. It's people on a sidewalk that are all, like, walking in the same direction. There is a self-organizing energy in our universe that doesn't have one person saying, walk this way, right? And what he is saying is that is true of our bodies, and that is true of everything. And as our science, emerges, I was watching a video yesterday where he talked about scientists naming things cells, right? Cells, if you think about a jail cell, it's a box, right? And there's nothing in the box. And scientists actually believed that. They thought cells, Western science says we are made up of cells. But it isn't until now or the last little while, right, that all of our instruments have gotten a lot more precise. And now they see that cells are just like, there's lots of things in cells. They're not empty, and you keep on going down and down and down and down. And you find these self-organizing systems that are all working in concert with each other. So I personally find this to be amazingly supportive. The idea that we are and the universe is actually self-organizing systems where everyone is reacting to their neighbors. And he says, coming from a Buddhist and a Jewish mystic tradition, that so you've got cells, you've got atoms, you've got molecules, you've got quantum quarks, you've got vacuums, and you've got a non-dual awareness that is actually informing all of that. And I think that as we know this, we really have the capacity to provide for ourselves some sustenance, some spiritual sustenance in adopting plurality purposely. So I know this is like kind of, maybe a little bit heavy, maybe a little bit complicated for sure. And in one sense, it's also very simple. Life finds a way. We're self-organizing, sustaining systems. And pluralism is a way of making room for others while maintaining their and your own identity. It's very effective in terms of innovative society, given our example of Ana Lucia. There's great commonalities between plurality and the emerging understanding of complexity theory. He says with complexity theory, like it's all like, like the ants, they're a food chain, right? They're going to get the food. But if you interrupt that, you put your foot down, or you put whatever, baking powder or hydrogen peroxide, or like whatever it is you use to like kind of help control ants, there will always be like one ant who will go around. And that is what he is saying. That's where adaptation as beings, as entities, like kind of come from. So so complexity theory gives us the opportunity to exchange our limited way of seeing all of ourselves as being independent and not connected, and just really at the mercy of people with not good intentions in our world, to a universe that's dynamic and cohesive and alive. There's a story of a Chinese farmer who, you may have heard it. It's called Maybe Yes, Maybe No. So this farmer, and he has neighbors. This farmer wakes up one morning and his horse has left the stable, and it's his prized possession. And the neighbors come and go, "Oh my goodness, that's really such bad news." And the farmer says, "Good news, Bad news, who knows, right? The next day, the horse comes back and brings this whole herd of wild horses. And the neighbors come again. And they go, oh my goodness, good news. You just got all these horses. And the farmer says, good news, bad news, who knows? His son, the next day, goes out and he's taming these wild horses and riding them, and he falls off and he breaks his leg. And the neighbors come again and they go, bad news, your son broke his leg. Farmer says, good news, bad news, who knows? The next day the army comes. And the army wants to constrict all able-bodied people. But the son has broken his leg. And the neighbors come and say, good news, bad news. The farmer says, who knows? And I think that kind of illustrates to us how keeping an open mind, thinking about lots of different ways that we might interpret the situation, knowing that when we actually consider, when we're in that self-sustaining relationship with others, with ourselves, that we and life will find a way The River Reporter this week has 2 letters to the editor in its section where the writers are taking the news media to task. And I'm about to take the news media to task as well, which is plurality maybe. We're not hearing the stories about working together. We're not hearing those things because it's not advantageous. But we know, and we can align ourselves with all of the good works that are happening, all of the ways that we can hold plurality in a way that supports us. And I think that is really one of the most that's what I like, clearly, about being a Unitarian Universalist. I believe there's many, many paths to truth. And we can find those together. So, I look forward to any comments that you might have. Plurality, complexity theory. Any thoughts? Sheila.
Actually, it was the Chinese that came up with a lot of the water techniques, including the water clock, the bulkhead, the lateen sail, the stern post rudder. But the Muslims, because they traveled the world, you see, when Muhammad started Islam in 622 AD, he had a lot of restive tribes that were accustomed to being merchants, and herders and warriors. So once they converted to Islam, and they're all doing the same thing for once, what is he going to do with them? So of course they're let loose on the world to convert people to Islam and become merchants and travelers and explorers. So they literally traverse the world and pick up a lot of ideas from a lot of different cultures, bring them back, and I'll talk about next week about some of their amazing accomplishments. But what else did I say? There was something else. Certainly, pluralism. The gentleman's name, Ibo, is a Turkish name, and Patel is an Indian name. So there must have been intermarriage in that family. I always talk about that as hybrid vigor. The more you have different, somewhat antagonistic groups coming together, the more you have a plethora of new ideas and new inventions and whatever. And what happened to the Muslims, of course, was Genghis Khan, who destroyed everything. And then unfortunately, the religious fanatics took over and Islam became, stayed very much like what happened to the Roman Catholic Church, clinging to traditional ideas. So I think that's what I want to say about that.
Steve,
Yeah, there was, talk about influence of people being, accessing other people's, philosophies and insights and such. There was a young man whose name has slipped my mind. All I know is that he was the inspiration for one of the characters in the motion picture American History X. He was a fervent white supremacist and anti-Semite. And when he was sent to prison on an assault charge, he actually started talking with other people from other faiths and other backgrounds. And he realized the error of his ways, and now is not only has he he's speaking out against the neo-Nazi movement, he actually hired one of these genetic background groups to check in your ancestry. And he found out that his ancestry also includes Ashkenazi Jew. So not only has this changed his worldview, he also has converted to Orthodox Judaism. So he went from being a fervent neo-Nazi, Holocaust denier and white supremacist, and now a man who reads the Torah and wears a tefillah during worship service.
So his prison experience was somewhat rehabilitated.
Yes, in many ways, in many ways.
But the experience that was rehabilitated was internal. It wasn't
Yes.
outside. It was the Department of Corrections.
Yes, it was what he finally realized and learned.
Rudy,
I'm struck, really, as you were starting, we have this national story that we are a country of immigrants and that we're stronger because each group has come in and done that. At the same time, we have this national hysteria about immigrants coming in. And that seems to go, not just in our country, but that seems to go in waves to other countries. That we don't really have trouble putting those ideas together. When I moved to Chicago 60 years ago, there was, where are you from? Well, you were from this parish or this parish or this parish. And that parish was directly linked to a country, Italy or France or whatever. Maybe
it's interesting, Neil Thies was talking about, in one sense, the self-organizing thing, like people self-organize into neighborhoods. I mean, sometimes there's redlining, of course, and all that, but he was using 6th Street in New York as a place where there's tons of Indian restaurants. You know what I mean? And nobody said, oh, Indian restaurants here, right? They self-organized into these places. So,
Same thing with settlement, Jews from one area, Irish Catholics from another, Greeks from another, exactly.
Just to share the story you told about the farmers and their neighbors and so on. There's a musician that is a very good friend of mine, Joe Cookson, who took that story and made it into song. And it's really wonderful, and I can have Tom send the link out if you're interested. It's just exactly, Tom and I just looked at each other, like, that story.
yeah. Any other comments?
Sharon has some.
Sharon,
You need to unmute.
unmute yourself, Sharon.
I said, I love Leah Morris's song, but there is another way to think about change. And I wrote this down the other day. And the thing is that, we accept everyone as they are and as we should. But another way of thinking of change, I wrote this down. Certainty is the enemy of change. If you have no curiosity, then change, because change equals growth. So even though you're saying we'll take you just as you are, don't change yourself. In other ways, we are hoping that some people will be curious enough to figure out what they might change to be more pluralistic, in their life. I am one that does say, however it turns out, I know it's going to be okay. I am a believer of that all the time. I put it out there, and whatever comes, I say it's supposed to be that way, and something good will come of it, or whatever. So I'm all about that. I just wanted to say one thing. I went to my Easton Area Democratic Committee meeting this week, and there was a woman speaking. Her name is Kathleen Camposano, and she has been like dispatched, and I'm not sure who the over umbrella is, but people are being dispatched all over the country to train people, especially in swing states, to do deep canvassing. And deep canvassing sounds a lot like a pluralistic approach. Otherwise, you go to a house, you probably know that they're already probably not good voters or not constant voters, and maybe not even Democrats. And you don't speak to them about who you're going to vote for. You just speak about them and share stories and get to know them and show your concern for their situation, and you add things about your situation. And sometimes, and I was a designated driver last week for what was not what I thought a deep canvassing session, but these people stayed with people for 20 and 25 minutes, just speaking about them and their lives and what they had in common. And in each case, they never spoke about who they were voting for or what they were voting for or anything. It was just a talk. And I'm going to be trained for deep canvassing, and I'm all about it, because it sounds to me like that's the way you get people to know you and trust you and like you, and conceivably begin to think a little bit about their motivation for why they're voting in certain ways. And I think that could be very useful, and they're hoping it will be very useful. It's been useful in past elections where they've won states that hadn't been won before. So that's what I'm all about, and I think I'll let it go with that. Oh, and also I don't know if it's absolutely true, but the story, we don't know. Tom says it is. I don't know that, because I don't know that for a fact. Tom says it. Tom, fine. I'm going to tell them the story. You got the message. The Indian restaurants, it turns out, are all owned by one family. You can check that out yourself. I won't swear to it. He will. 6th Street Indian restaurants. So there you go. So you'd have to get some info on that to see whether your story holds.
Always, right? Go ahead, Sheila.
I just wanted to wrap it up and say that, when Isabel and Ferdinand bankrolled Columbus, and the reason they bankrolled Columbus is because they had to pay for all the wars to get rid of the Muslims and the Jews. She had, both of them had accrued a huge debt. And so the idea was Columbus would, get to, not of course the New World, but he would get the route to Asia, and all the gold and silver would pay off the debt. So to make a long story short, as you know, instead he found the New World, and then Spain extracted all the gold and silver, from South America. And interestingly enough, they put it in the churches. When you go in today, there are still guards, because there's so much gold and silver in these churches. Caused a lot of inflation, and in getting rid of, purging the Muslims and the Jews, who were the most productive people in the kingdom, started a long slide down to, a third-rate country, which, and I don't mean to be boorish, because it's just there, but really, if you ask anybody in the EU, they always talk about Spain and, Greece being the bottom feeders, the ones that are, squandering the money, the third-rate nation. So in getting rid of all of those innovators and just going for a homogeneous, Roman Catholic population, it was really self-destructive.
One thing
What made that possible?
Oh,
Because you described, because we have
Because
this
there's
image
always-
of a utopian
Right.
community that was balanced.
because
What
there's
opened the door to the end of it?
because there's always this fear and hatred of the other. I just said to my Holy Book Club, reading the Other Americans the other day, and I said, seems like I'm bad mouthing Donald Trump, but it wasn't very hard for him to turn people against Chinese and especially seniors. They went after the seniors, not the young people, with the Kung Fu virus and all of that. Because that hatred of the other, the same thing with Hitler and the Jews, it's always under the surface. And what you need really to bring that to the fore, is a gifted, and I don't say that in a positive way, but someone who can scratch that surface and get at all of those latent stereotypes and expose them. Because in quotes, and that was because of the Middle Ages, and that even goes back to Russia. Jews were not allowed to own land. They weren't allowed to cultivate. They could only deal with money because in the Catholic Church, it was usury to buy or, sell or lend money. So the Jews were always associated with accumulation of money. In fact, even during the plague of the Middle Ages, the nobles who had borrowed so much money from the Jews accused them of poisoning the wells, knowing that they were dying too, so that they wouldn't have to pay their debts. They could kill them and then they could rip up the debts. So when you have that kind of stereotype, and with the Muslims, infidels, non-believers, having legally 4 wives, all of that sort of thing, all you have to do is stir that up a little bit and it comes right to the fore. And it's terrifying because you see Donald Trump doing that today, And even in the European Union, they're talking about Marine Le Pen again. It's terrifying. Sorry, I didn't mean to depress everyone. Never invite a historian to these groups.
I think, I know it's a very simplistic, but power and money and greed, right, is kind of underneath that kind of thing. And interestingly enough, we're being asked through our faith and science and everything else to, in one sense, to find that place where we could be counter to that. And I guess what there was Stephen Hawkins wrote a book called The Movement that the biggest movement in the whole world that nobody knows about. And what that is a book that just outlines like all of the indigenous groups and the environmental groups and all of the different activist groups that are actually affecting change. But you're not hearing about them because it doesn't serve the people in power to empower people.
Look at how long the horrors of smoking were repressed. Look at how long the oil companies, were saying that all of this business about climate change, was all a myth. And I just read something that terrified me the other day in Time magazine, the issue that says, if he's elected, this is what he said, it just hit the stand and it hit my mailbox. And one of the articles is about AI. And they said, there's so much money in AI that even, with the new Chat GPT, all of this coming out, a number of them realize the threat and the danger to our society and want to have laws and regulations to limit it. But the overwhelming majority are asking for absolutely no changes whatsoever. And they're lobbying Congress actively because there's so much money involved in this.
But you must remember, it really is a scientific fact that, and I don't understand it, but the other side of it is they say that a butterfly flaps his wings in Mexico, and there could be there is an effect. So that, and that's kind of my point. My point is we can't get swallowed up by all of these narratives that are being put out, we have to like kind of open ourselves up, and in opening ourselves up and being that energy, we affect change. We are not powerless. We are not powerless. And something like pluralism, something, those kinds of things help us in our own way to be that energy that walks in the room that lights it up. Do you know what I mean? That is the counter. That, as Sharon was saying, like that listens to that other and provides some kind of like connection. This is really the choice that we have right now. And it's a really tough one. You know what I mean? It's hard to, it is hard. It absolutely is. In confession time, like I spend way too much time, like with dark mahjong, a game that's on the Washington Post website. You know what I mean? And I open it up and go, I don't want to be doing this, and then there I am. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of forces kind of pushing us into addiction and false realities and everything else like that. But there also is these tenets of the universe that talk about self-organizing and being in relationship with people. Those birds are self-organizing and they are reacting to people around them. We innately do it, and we need to like be aware that this is our positive influence on the world. It is the antidote to all of the horrible things. And I started out with them. This is the world we're living in. It really is. It really is. But there are these other things, how you feel when you're holding your granddaughter, or, me trying to decide with my asparagus bed which asparagus is getting like picked now. There are moments that we have, and we really, as people, need to be concentrating. What are you listening for? And I'm advocating this morning. We want to be listening for plurality. We want to be listening to life emerging. This is where, because Thoreau will tell you, Emerson will tell you, whatever you pay attention to, science will tell you, whatever you pay attention to expands.
So a great thing for everyone to do is to ride on the subway in New York City. Just ride, take the train, get on, and see who comes in and see who goes off, and you will see the whole world in one car. And I always had the most pride when I thought, like, I'm a part of all of this, and it's really, really, really great. It was, such an eye opener to me. I came from a ghetto, but I was always very open-minded, much more than the rest of my family, and it's why I left, because I just couldn't go for it. I heard too many negative things. But New York City is a model. I don't know what's happening there. I've been away for a few years, but certainly everybody is drawn to that city because there is a certain amount of welcome. They know they can find some place in that city to be themselves. So I just think that would be a good thing. Have everybody just go to New York City for a while and see how everybody else manages to get along very, very well, and actually not only be tolerant, but be accepting of others.
Sharon, I was on the subway last week and nothing's changed.
Oh my God. You mean it's still, everybody's getting on yarmulkes?
And everybody gives you advice on where to go.
I know. It's just, yeah. It's refreshing, right?
Yes.
And there's receptivity.
Yes.
I know. Exactly.
I was on the train taking quince branches to a friend, branches from here to a friend who lives across from the stock exchange. So in the subway, I have this man, and he says, "Those roses," and I said, "No, we have a discussion." And then, as I got off the train, somebody across me said, "Those are so beautiful." That kind of connection happened all through my life in New York. It's still happening.
Unbelievable.
City's struggling, there's no question about it, but the city has always struggled. And when I think about never living there anymore, that's what I miss.
Mhm.
I miss the woman who's the crosswalk guard, who keeps inviting me to her revivalist church in Harlem.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's the life of the street, which Jane Jacobs said was the thing that made New York and cities, that observing and that connection. And when we lose that, we lose cities, we lose communities. And that's what we're in danger of now, right? With what's happening politically. But it happens again and again because it's the cycle of humanity as well as the cycle of nature. You know? And you're saying cleave to plurality in ourselves as a way to maintain ourselves in the midst of all this change, correct?
Yes, it's exactly what I'm saying. I have one closing song. It's called All Is Unity. And the words go, no one is able to separate one from another. No one is able to separate one from another. That's it. No one is able to separate one from another. No one is able to separate one from another. All is unity. That's it. That's the next part. All is unity. Start from the beginning. No one is able to separate one from another. No one is able to separate one from another. All is unity. Again. All is unity. We are unity. We are unity. We'll just do the whole thing again. No one is able to separate one from another. No one is able to separate one from another. All is unity. All is unity. We are unity. We are unity. All is unity. Last time, all is unity. All is unity.
Guys, 75% of Generation Z is concerned about climate change. Now just get them out to vote.
Refreshment time. Thank you very, very much.
It's part of the candles.
Oh, yes, we can extinguish our candle. I have one more quote from, not from Evo, from Aga Khan. A secure pluralistic society requires communities that are educated and confident, both in the identity and the depths of their own tradition and in those of their neighbors.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Laurie. Thanks, everybody. See you again sometime, maybe next week.
Say hello to the ducks and the frogs.
I will. I'm going right out to feed them. They're too cute. You would love them.